Welcome back, and in this video, let's talk about the downward trajectory of our Australian community into socialism. What is socialism? How one nation is putting Australia first and restoring our democracy, and where the socialist agenda and the 10 core principles come from to change our democracy into a communist country. It is more obvious than you think, and why the Labor Socialist Party must be voted out of the next 2028 federal election. The end result of socialism, as seen in the 20th century, is that socialism of any type leads to a total destruction of the human spirit and to a leveling of mankind into death, such as the Great Famine of China, where 40 million people were forced into poverty and into extinction from starvation. Let's avoid this destruction. You will notice the same left-wing socialist agenda playing out worldwide, so bear with me and have a listen to this as we explain socialism and why you need to avoid it.
I was elected as a democratic socialist, and I will govern as a democratic socialist. I will not abandon my principles for fear of being deemed radical. Through our new citywide campaign, Fix the City, we will focus on the worst landlords in New York City. When necessary, we will take aggressive legal action to remove negligent owners and property managers. And for buildings that have suffered chronic neglect, we will work to transfer ownership to responsible stewards. Stewards that include community land trusts, nonprofits, or even the tenants themselves.
You see, a socialist democrat will confiscate your property regardless of the reasons why it may have been inadequately maintained in the first place. And the word neglect is ambiguous. But as you heard, private property can be confiscated and transferred to non-profits and tenants themselves. People who have not worked to own a property can have it confiscated. That's what socialism is, the end of private property. Yes, it is in America. However, socialism follows these same core principles. Doesn't matter which country it is in, and Australia is no different. That's why you're seeing the impacts on your quality of life here in Australia. So the question is the Labor Party a democratic socialist? So if we go to the Labor website and then we scroll down and we see Labor's constitution, rules and policies. And if we open this link and we have a look at, I'll just zoom in, and we actually have a look at the ALP National Constitution as of 19th of August 2023, and we just scroll down here to its objectives. The Australian Labor Party is a democratic socialist party. So they are for the same core principles that you've seen in New York, that you see in the UK, that you see across every socialist country in this world. So you have to wonder why Australia is going down in the downward trajectory of socialism is because you, the Australian people, keep voting for a socialist political party, which only ends in destruction of civilizations. Look up China, the Great Famine, Mao Zedong. Look up Venezuela, Chavez and Maduro. Look up Fidel Castro in Cuba. Look up East Germany. Look up North Korea style. Australia is going down the same route, especially with its speech laws in silencing you about your basic communication. And has the objective of the democratic socialization of industry, production, distribution, just like Mayor Mamdani distributing private property to other people such as renters, and exchange to the extent necessary to limit exploitation, which is capitalism, and other antisocial features in these fields. So the whole propaganda for socialism is to basically eliminate capitalism. Yes, we need to do better for a social conscience in a democracy, but to eliminate democracy and eliminate the ability that capitalism gets people out of poverty in exchange for socialism that puts people in poverty and causes tens of millions of starvation and death is something we should be avoiding altogether. So what are the 10 core principles of socialism that all socialist democracies follow to convert democracies to communist countries? Let's not forget that socialism is the implementation phase of the end result of communism. So here are the 10 core principles socialist democracies follow based on the Karl Marx Communist Manifesto, and notice the changes being implemented through our Australian Labor Socialist Party.
These measures will of course be different in different countries. Nevertheless, in the most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable. 1. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. 2. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax. 3. Abolition of all right of inheritance. 4. Confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. 5. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. 6. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. 7. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. 8. Equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. 9. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equable distribution of the population over the country. 10. Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production, and etc., and etc. When, in the course of development, class distinctions have disappeared, and all production has been concentrated in the hands of a vast association of the whole nation, the public power will lose its political character. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing another. If the proletariat during its contest with the bourgeoisie is compelled, by the force of circumstances, to organize itself as a class, if, by means of a revolution, it makes itself the ruling class, and as such sweeps away by force the old conditions of production, then it will, along with these conditions, have swept away the conditions for the existence of class antagonisms and of classes generally, and will thereby have abolished its own supremacy as a class.
So where have we heard this before? One example, the 20th century China, where more than 40 million people starved to extinction and was forced, after World War II, to move to an open market and capitalist approach to bring people out of poverty, which could have been avoided in the first place. Whenever socialist political parties like Labour raise taxes to uncomfortable levels to abolish private property, legislate through speech laws to silence you from having a democratic opinion, decimate our economy with excessive inflation and reckless, unaccountable government spending, further keeps us in the cycle of higher inflation and tax increases, which only push more people into poverty and homelessness. That is why One Nation should be voted in the next 2028 federal election because of her advocacy for free speech, repealing of Labor's communist anti-speech laws, remove diversity and equity as an unfair employment method, and significantly reduce the public office employees by hiring on merit, not skin color. And how do I know all this? Because of her free speech policy, placing the power back into the people's hands. So her free speech policy believes it should be enshrined in the Constitution to safeguard open debate, free expression, and the rights of all Australians to speak their minds without fear. What she wants to do is to enshrine free speech in the Constitution by moving to establish the framework for a referendum to protect the fundamental basic human right. We will push for constitutional protection of free speech and work to repeal any laws of government bodies that restrict it, such as the previous Labor speech laws and their current proposed misinformation speech laws, which we'll cover in another video. Censorship, speech regulations, and bureaucratic overreach that silence everyday Australians will be dismantled. She literally wants to put the power back into the people's hands. So you should never have fear, and you should always be able to speak your mind like a free entity. I personally have traveled across America, and I love the land of the free. What you see on the internet is not accurate to reality on the ground across America. When you travel across America, you experience true freedom. Here in Australia, we are heavily guarded by North Korean style governing, where you are threatened with imprisonment for simply having a conversation. That has to change. She is the only one willing to protect your free speech. Why are we not voting for this common sense approach? And if we look at One Nation's most recent campaign, Fire the Liar, in response to Albanese being threatened by One Nation, and rightly so, because she is genuine, authentic, and wants the best for Australian citizens. So what has Albo actually lied about? The forced immigration levels being forced upon us Australian citizens. You only got to look at the effects in Melbourne to see the toxic nature of home invasions by some of the third world country people, and that has been well established. The ISIS brides coming back into our country with nothing but contempt for us Australian citizens. Axed the stage 3 cuts, the voice to Parliament, which wasted $1 million, lied about the 275 reduction in electricity prices. Our energy prices are going through the roof. Medicare and bulk billing, changes to capital gains tax, which affects every single person that wanted to get ahead in life by simply taking out investment loans, getting some property, and hopefully playing the property game over a 10-year period. Suddenly you now have to, under this communist government, have to pay them more and more. So you're taking all that risk just to pay the government. That's communism. That's the most anti-democratic policies that you could have in the recent federal government budget, especially the changes to negative gearing as you just purchase an investment property and while you're just getting up on your feet, making the necessary adjustments for it to be profitable or positively geared. So how much has she actually raised in a 24-hour period, I may add? Have a look at that. She started off with $1 million. And every single time I have refreshed this page, it keeps increasing by about 10,000 or 15,000, etc. They started off with $1 million goal. And look at that. In 24 hours, they have $2 million from people across the country that have simply come on here, donated whatever they want to donate. And yes, you can do a custom amount. I'm not suggesting you should, but it does help. $2 million has gone into fight the liar and get rid of Labor out of our parliament. This is by far the worst government in living history, where we are compulsively lied to. Don't even get me started on climate change and the absolute nonsense that's being propagated towards us. So let's vote for One Nation. Let's give our country a new fresh start and a new direction back into democracy, away from socialism, and let's bring the true blue Australian culture back to life. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one.